introducing us all. So welcome to this morning's Innovation Festival session. My name is Natalie Jones and I'm Head of Regional Engagement in the Northwest of England for the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. I'm involved today because I'm a member of the newly established Lancashire Innovation Board, and I was really glad to get this chance to be with you, albeit virtually, to talk about this topic. The topic is, of course, artificial intelligence, which can excite people as well as horrify people, but that's why we wanted to talk about it today and the particular role that it can play in business innovation. So this morning I have three speakers joining me. We have Professor Magnus Rattray from the Institute of Data Science from the University of Manchester, representing the Alan Turing Institute. I'm really glad to have Magnus here representing the ATI, because the ATI is the National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. We also have Professor Nick Race from the Computing and Communications Department at Lancaster University, who's going to talk about a particular collaborative project that has a particular element of artificial intelligence in it. And then somebody I'm sure many of you will know, Mike Gibson from Miralis, based at Lancaster, the data science and software development company, working particularly in the logistics industry. So I've asked Magnus, Nick and Mike to give some presentations about artificial intelligence from their particular perspective. And then there'll be time for questions, and we'll also have a bit of a discussion between ourselves. Please contribute your questions, as Dan said, into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Dan is here helping us, and Dan has of course been instrumental to how this festival has been actually taking place. Just very briefly, before I ask each of the speakers, just to give a little short biography about who they are and who their organisations are. As I say, I'm Natalie. I'm from the EPSRC. It's the principal UK-wide funder of engineering and physical sciences research based at UK universities. That covers a very wide number of areas, from mathematics, physics and chemistry, right through to applications of, say, ICT in different sectors, be it energy, healthcare and transport. So just yesterday, for example, we announced an award to researchers at the University of Leeds looking at the spread and control of COVID-19 on public transport systems. And actually EPSRC and our sister organisations, including Innovate UK, have been working incredibly hard over the last few months, making funding available to researchers across the UK to tackle COVID-19, much of which you'll probably see in the press. So if you want to know more about EPSRC and UKRI, on this slide that I'm just about to share with you, you'll find our Twitter handle. And go from there. We should be able to see that now. So that's the session we're holding today about artificial intelligence. This is who I am joined by, Magnus, Nick and Mike. And you'll see at the bottom, in the bottom right-hand corner, the EPSRC and the UKRI Twitter handles if you'd like to know more about what we do. You'll also obviously see the hashtag for LANIF 2020. And as Dan said earlier on, there are still plenty of events to go, and there are 2 more today. So may I ask, first of all, Magnus, just to give us a quick biography of who you are, what you do, and a bit about your centre and the ATI at Manchester. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Magnus Rattray. Thanks for having me here. I'm Director of the Institute for Data Science and AI at the University of Manchester. And I'm also a Fellow of the Turing Institute, which is the National Institute for Data Science and AI. Natalie, do you want me to do my presentation now, or are we doing intro?
No, not just yet.
Not yet. Okay, so yeah, the University of Manchester Institute coordinates across the all faculties our data science and AI activities at Manchester. And then the Turing Institute is the National Institute. So I'm sort of the Manchester lead on that distributed institute. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Nick.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Professor Nick Race. I'm from Lancaster University, part of the School of Computing and Communications. And I'm going to be talking about some of the project work that I'm doing with British Telecom, and particularly around AI in that area. Now, I've been at Lancaster for about 25 years now, so from a student right the way through to an academic. And in that time, I've been very much focused on kind of networking challenges from kind of the nature of Lancashire and delivering broadband into hard to reach locations, and now very much working with BT on how we can improve through the use of AI technologies the delivery of networks across the region and in the UK. So very much around networking and how we can make networks better for customers is really the focus of my work at the moment. Okay.
I didn't realise, Nick, that you had been at Lancaster since being a student.
It is, yes. So right from an undergraduate through to doing a PhD, and doing a PhD with BT as well. So it's interesting to come back from early days of working with BT as a PhD and now leading a project with them in this area. So yes.
That's wonderful, and that just shows what is possible in the academic community, starting at that early stage and really carrying on. Thank you very much. Mike.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Michael Gibson. I'm the Managing Director at Morales Data, based in the beautiful city of Lancaster, as you can see from outside my window behind me. I got involved in the world of digital about 20 years ago when I launched a magazine in the UK called Internet World. And pretty much ever since then, really trying to learn about what the internet can deliver for organizations, for companies, and delivered that in a whole range of different ways. So built a digital agency and sold that about 5 years ago, and I've worked on a whole raft of other initiatives and ideas, and been involved in organizations like Digital Lancashire as the founding chair. And yeah, data science is something that was quite core to how businesses marketed themselves, and actually the way that Google sells its services and manages its operations has always been something that was core to what we did within there. So I met a guy who lived across the road who's more related to these two guys in terms of that he worked as a data scientist, but was at the University of Huddersfield as a lecturer. And when we got together, it was kind of like, you've got the brilliant ideas, and we've got the means, hopefully, then to take that out to a wider audience. So that's pretty much what we've been doing ever since.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And it's wonderful, isn't it, when you see that the serendipity that can help something sort of take off. Obviously, at the moment, it's very difficult for us to meet people in person, and that's why I think having this virtual innovation festival is really, really important, because it is a chance for people to meet new people that they can't meet in person at the moment. So, but also that point about serendipity is obviously sometimes really key to innovation, isn't it, about those new products and services? But we want to have more than just serendipity, hopefully, making those things happen. So thank you very much. Magnus, can I ask you to kick us off with your presentation about the Turing Institute?
Okay, I need to share my screen. Here we are. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to quickly introduce the Turing Institute. So the Turing Institute is a National Institute for Data Science and AI. Now, it does have a sort of physical office space at the British Library in London, but it's actually a distributed institute that really serves the whole of the UK. And it's a network of industry, charity and government partners. There's a network of 13 university members, and it's also a strategic investment from UKRI, so EPSRC that Natalie represents. And the goals are to innovate and develop world-class research in data science and AI. It's really focused on real-world problems, so these things should be really relevant and not kind of very abstract. We're interested in training the next generation of data scientists, and we're interested in advising policymakers and the public. So as I said, it's a network across 13 universities. So I'm based in Manchester, and that's one of the partners. And there's over 400 Turing fellows, and they're distributed across these universities. So although the central office is in London, most of the fellows are actually across the UK. It also has strategic industry partners or public sector partners, and they fund programs at the Turing, or they collaborate on projects at the Turing. And so there's a lot of stakeholders from industry. So the work is organized around programs. So as I said, Turing's really trying to engage real world problems. So rather than being sort of focused just on methodological areas like machine learning, etc., it's more focused on challenge areas. So for instance, revolutionizing healthcare, improving engineering, that type of thing. So that helps the Turing kind of focus on relevant challenges rather than sort of abstract areas of academic research. So to take an example, the engineering program run by Mark Girolami, this is a very nice kind of program which is doing interesting things in engineering. So here's an example where they were looking at digital twinning, sort of highly censored systems, in this case sort of 3D printed bridge with sensors, and then building computer models to help with the sort of design of these systems when you scale up to larger bridges in this case. I work on medical AI in my research, and so the Turing has a big program in health research, the Shah is part of that, in world scientists applying machine learning in healthcare, and this is an example of kind of making a risk prediction system using machine learning. The Turing's also very interested in sort of policy and government, and how you can sort of bring AI and data science more into policy to have sort of smarter government. I'm sure we'd all like that. And there's also a big focus on ethics, and that's very kind of a big issue at the moment. You know, can we ensure that when we deploy AI systems that we're doing this in an ethical way? And a lot of researchers at the Turing are very interested in sort of the implications of AI and how you can make things more ethical, more fair, more transparent when you deploy them in the real world. So how to engage? So the Turing runs data study groups, and they can be at any of the partner sites. So, you know, we run these things at Manchester. Companies can come in with their data and work with young scientists, PhD students, postdocs on that data over an intensive week, and sort of come up with a nice kind of solution to problems, and then that can build on to partnerships with industry. We have a social good program, which is really good for not-for-profits to collaborate with. We have an internship network. And this year, we're going to have a lot of regional activities. So at Manchester, for instance, we're going to be running workshops related to the GM local industrial strategy around health technology, manufacturing, clean growth, and digital. So any companies of any size want to get involved in those workshops, then you can get in touch with me. And more generally, if you want to get involved in the Turing, you can contact them on this email to discuss partnerships. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Magnus. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, if that was all right, before I turn to Nick. So could you just mention a little bit more about the internship network and what, you know, who that's available to?
So it's a pilot scheme at the moment, and it's been worked up with 4 companies. I'm sorry, I can't remember who off the top of my head. So it's being piloted, but hopefully next year it can be rolled out across, you know, any partners that so the Turing, I think, would be interested in talking to people who'd be interested in running that kind of internship scheme. And then I guess the idea is for interns to kind of be embedded either both within companies and also within Turing partners to learn about sort of skills, data science and AI skills. So it's kind of really about skills.
Yes.
Yeah. But if you want more info about that, then let me know and I can put you in touch with the person leading that.
Thank you. Yes, because as I mentioned to the speakers before we started, I'm going to be doing a blog post following this this event, and that sort of information would be really helpful, because that sort of people exchange is absolutely critical, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, I should say also, if people are in, because Manchester is obviously, you know, regionally close to Lancashire, historically was in Lancashire, but then we also, our Data Science Institute, have helped companies place interns and advertise for interns. So if people are interested in that kind of thing, they can also talk to us at our Data Science Institute. So that's a little plug.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Great. Okay. And I just wanted to ask a little bit more about your personal work area and that work on cystic fibrosis. Could you
That wasn't me. That was Mihaela van der Schaar, actually. I mean, I work on medical AI. So at the moment, we're doing a lot of work, for instance, on coronavirus, obviously. So I'm part of the UKRI MRC's UK KIC program, which is a sort of cross-university analysis of the immunological response to coronavirus. And that's an example where it's really a big data science project, because every university has their own data from local hospitals, but really integrating that data, making sense of it across, you know, centers, or each data science project involving lots of data wrangling and so on. So this is a really kind of big area where data science is one of the key things that we need to solve these problems.
Yes. Thank you very much. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, researchers supported by UKRI and EPSRC very much playing a key role in the response to the coronavirus. Thank you very much, Magnus, for that introduction. Nick, may I turn to you now and your presentation? Thank you.
Sure. Let me see if I can make the technology work. It's always worrying when you're involved in technology and things don't quite go according to plan. So is that looking okay for everyone?
It's looking good. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so thanks for the opportunity to talk a bit more about the Next Generation Converged Digital Infrastructure project. So this is a project that I'm leading with British Telecom and a host of other universities from across the UK. So I'll give you a little bit of a project overview just to set some context, and then I'll explain a little bit more about the motivations and how that's leading into really AI being a core project. So this is a prosperity partnership project. So this was a new scheme that EPSRC set up back in, actually it was 2016 when that first round of prosperity partnerships, the call was launched. So this is a program. I'll talk a little bit more about what prosperity partnerships are on the next slide, but it's a £5 million program running over a 5-year period. The funding was split 50-50 between EPSRC and British Telecom, and it was really about how we're building the next generation infrastructure behind, if you like, the operations of BT. So how can we use AI, new data, and all of that good data science technology with artificial intelligence to build networks that are more self-managing, so that what we might term autonomic in some way. It involves a number of different universities and reflects a range of different skills from those universities. So from Lancaster, we've got myself in the networking area. We have colleagues in maths and stats. From Cambridge, we have folks looking at more of the industrial automation side, and particularly how aspects around things like AI relate to organizations and humans and trusting in that AI within a business. Within Surrey, we have colleagues working again in networks, particularly in the 5G area. And then at Bristol, we have colleagues working more on the wireless side of networks. So what is a prosperity partnership? So this was a new scheme, as I said, launched by EPSRC back in 2016, and now the fourth round has just concluded. So I thought it was useful for perhaps people to kind of have a sense of what this scheme is. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for businesses to get involved, and it's very much around business-led research partnership. So this is really a co-creation between academia and businesses to create opportunities for research that will really add value in some form to the UK. Now, consortia are formed from businesses and universities. There must be a strategic relationship in place between the lead business and the university partner, but there's certainly a desire from EPSRC, and this is particularly in the case in this fourth round, to involve SMEs, supply chain companies in these prosperity partnerships. So this, I think, is a really exciting opportunity. I'm hoping there'll be more rounds of this program in the future. But it's a really exciting scheme, and I'll touch a bit about what we've been doing in that project. So, so just to kind of move from what the scheme's about, I'll say a few words about the project itself. So NGCDI was really set up, and this is always about, these prosperity partnerships are always about addressing a core business challenge. And for BT, this was in the context of a future of autonomous vehicles, the demand and huge demand now coming in from IoT, the continual growth we see in video traffic from kind of standard definition, high definition, and 4K and beyond. Virtual reality and augmented reality all being key kind of new and upcoming technologies and exciting applications of those technologies, but also the big unknown, and a lot of these placing huge demands on network infrastructure. We kind of take it for granted that these networks work, and I guess the current time is kind of reinforcing the fact that we need networks and we need them to support all these new exciting applications. So around that time, some really interesting technologies coming along as well. So we've seen a lot more agility in networks and network software, and the fact that people can kind of bring things on stream very quickly. We've got a huge array of data now that we can use. We can collate data from systems, but there's still the question about how we make good decisions with that data. We've got technologies such as virtualization that's really enabled things like cloud computing to happen. We've got 5G very much now with us, and with us for the foreseeable future before we move on to another 6G technology. We've got autonomics and the ability to kind of self-manage systems. And then lastly, and this is where I'll just focus towards the end of the presentation, we have AI, and that being a kind of huge opportunity to use AI within their business. So I've kind of picked on, if you like, one aspect. The projects, as you've seen, it's quite a large project, many partners. So I've touched on one aspect that hopefully people can see how AI could really help that scenario. So let's focus on service assurance. So a big challenge within BT is obviously they have a huge infrastructure, lots of equipment deployed. How can they be better at detecting faults and responding to those faults as quickly as possible? How could we get to a scenario where we could even predict the possibility of a fault and react to that before a customer's even noticed it? And that's, if you like, the ultimate desire from BT's side, so that actually network issues are observed, resolved before even they become a significant problem. So this is all part of that ability to take data from systems, understand performance data, perhaps look at what's happening with those assets and using AI to detect when there are things that are abnormal in those assets, looking at whether we can understand behaviors of those assets. So these might be network devices that are within our home or within the region. Perhaps detecting patterns. So can we predict a failure based on perhaps an unusual temperature, that a reading that we get? And so we start to learn the fact that actually that looks like there's an impending failure about to happen. So can we understand that behavior? And therefore, if you like, if that failure is to continue, potentially there could be huge service outages. So what optimal interventions can we take to preempt action and avoid that failure? And so using AI to not just kind of identify potential issues, but also help to resolve those issues. And of course, using that in being conscious that there's also humans involved in this, and there's a big challenge there of when do you reach out to a human to make decisions, or when do you let the system make autonomous decisions. And so whether that means that the system automatically notifies, say, an engineer that they need to go out and schedule a repair of a piece of equipment. And so learning from all of that process, because obviously that's not a one-time process, that happens for every single device that we might have in an infrastructure, learning that, feeding that back, and then potentially redesigning a lot of this process. So also using those experiences that we gained from repairs, actually feeding that back in the loop, and then improving the AI system so that it can help make better decisions when there's future faults as well. So that's kind of one part of the project that hopefully gives you an idea of where AI could put huge benefits in being able to kind of predict, preempt faults, and actually then make decisions around resolving those faults with interventions, possibly in an automated way that can happen without human intervention, or it may need human intervention for certain cases. But it's all about that aspect of AI within service assurance. So hopefully that's given you a kind of a glimpse into one of the aspects of the project. If you'd like further information, we have a website, ngcdi.org. This is a project at Lancaster that is part of our Data Science Institute. So if you're interested in engaging on aspects around data science and AI, I'd encourage you to visit the website there. There's lots of ways in which we can engage at Lancaster. If there's opportunities with guest lectures, there's opportunities for projects. We're always interested in having students work with companies, work on real company challenges that they have. And so schemes like data science and some of our master's programs, all are vehicles in which you can engage and work with students to help address real business challenges. So with that, I think I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. And as we were saying earlier, you are yourself an example of where you started to work with BT as a student. And 25 years on, you are now working with them. And I think that's one of the things about having internships and placements and opportunities to engage. Who knows where that relationship can lead? We've got an example here. Thank you very much for that, Nick, and just sort of showing just how artificial intelligence is playing a critical role in solving a business's fundamental problem and trying to make sure that the human input is as strategically effective as possible. The other thing I just wanted to say as following Nick's presentation is, and also Magnus made this point as well, about just how many universities are collaborating together. It's researchers working at different institutions, bringing different expertise together to solve these problems. And that is very much what EPSRC is interested in funding. Yes, we fund fundamental research in some of these areas, but increasingly those collaborations between researchers and business, between researchers and policymakers are what we fund. And it's a way of bringing expertise from different parts of the country to bear on particular challenges. So thank you very much for that, Nick. May I now turn to Mike to talk a little bit about his experience with AI in the logistics industry.
I'd love to show you, but it says on my screen that I host disabled participant screen sharing. So I'm not quite sure how I can do that. But
oh, okay.
Oh, got it now. Brilliant.
Okay, thank you. Technology, and you are now available for screen sharing.
Thank you, sir. Just give me a second. No one show me. So let's have a look. Yeah, it's not looking at my computer. Bear with me a second. See, the problem with technology is working in technology is technology itself. So hang on 1 second. No, it doesn't want to show my screen at the moment. Sorry, just give me a second so I can try and resolve it, but it's not letting me show my files when I go to share.
So whilst Mike just needs a moment, in the Q&A, we're starting to get some questions. So the general question around, Does the panel think that we've got the balance right between regulation and innovation when it comes to AI at the moment? Magnus spoke about the ethics and trust around the development and deployment of artificial intelligence technologies as being very much core to the Alan Turing Institute's work. So perhaps at some point later on, I'll come back to you about that, Magnus. Or rather, so do we have the balance right between regulation and innovation? And then there's a question for Nick about has the decision by BT to take some global supplier equipment out of the network impacted on the project in any way? Or is the data and insights derived equipment agnostic? So perhaps I'll come back to you in a moment.
I'll let you talk for 2 minutes and I'll just leave and come back again and see what happens.
Right, okay. So Magnus, do you have anything to say about your views on the balance between regulation and innovation at the moment? Is that something that the ATI is looking at?
So there's a new institute around that focuses more on the ethics, which is the Lovelace Institute, and I think that so it's really around data. The challenges are maybe around data ownership and around AI deployment, I think, and regulation. So and it's a very active area. So for instance, if you think about medical regulation, at the moment, when you have a medical device, often the sort of decision making lies with the human user. Have the regulation, I think, is a bit more lightweight. But as we move over to a situation where AI is increasingly making the decisions and it's not being passed over to humans, then I think the regulation of these systems is going to have to evolve. And I think it's quite difficult currently to regulate devices. And it's a bit similar with driverless vehicle regulation as well, I think. So, at the moment, you can have a device in your car which parks it, for instance. But the idea with that is that it's kind of in a very restricted usage, and the human can kind of override these kind of functions. But once we move into fully autonomous systems, then it's going to be far more complex to regulate these things. So we do have a PhD student who's a law student, actually, who's investigating these areas around law. So yeah, I think it's evolving. In terms of data ownership, I think the danger there is that people will lose rights to their own data to companies. And I think this is a big risk. And there's a lot of interesting work on data trusts, for instance. So I think Neil Lawrence at Cambridge has a program looking into this kind of area of how to deal with data ownership in a more sensible way. Because the big risk is that the big companies like Amazon and Google and so on will end up having a sort of data monopoly. And this is not really going to be good for the small operators, small companies, and it's not going to be necessarily the best thing for individuals either. So yeah, it's a very active area. It's not my area of research, but it's an area where people at the Turing are kind of actively engaging, and you have to engage with policymakers over this.
Yes. You mentioned earlier on, Magnus, that the ATI is that's another partner, government as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll come back to the questions a bit later. Thank you, Mike. We've got your slides.
Brilliant. Yeah, sorry about that. I
No,
have no idea what goes on with these things. Yeah, just to give you very quickly, I try a whistle-top tour about just a few of the things that we're involved in, doing very clever things in AI, trying to use those in terms of practical applications to solve real-world problems. So obviously our key area is reducing carbon emissions in transport, logistics and supply chains. But one of the reasons why people do that obviously is not just the carbon emissions and environmental health benefits, it's things like to create efficiencies in their organizations, which saves them on cost, operational benefits, and then ultimately obviously even create some headroom to be able to make them more competitive against their competition and so on, which is why people buy into the services that we do. So I'm just going to give you a really quick view of what's actually so I just got to talk very quickly about pallets, and everybody thinks, well, pallets, they're the stuff that you put goods on and you move them around. So CHEP Europe, for example, which we work with, are one of the largest players in pallet supply, and their pallets in the UK alone travel 1 billion miles a year. So gives you a bit of an idea. 237 million pounds a year is spent just on buying and reconditioning pallets. It's a huge industry. There's over 10 billion pallets in use around the world. So why pallets? Well, basically what we're doing is involved in optimizing layouts of pallets. So if I just show you a quick diagram there, and you can see gappage in the pallets and in the layout. And what we've designed and built is algorithms that basically create the best pallet layouts. That has a number of benefits. Obviously, it reduces the number of pallets that you then have to move, but also then does a number of other things as well. It creates greater pallet stability, because pallets that fall over cause huge problems in lorries and they have to be resupplied and all the various issues that come with it. But then what we do is also, this is a very reactive process. It basically says, look, this is a way to improve what you already do. What we're trying to do is do more proactive work. And that's saying, so for example, if you're transitioning from plastics to cardboard, for example, or doing different things, that you can actually start to redesign an optimal packaging solution. So just very quickly, for clients that use this product, so we have Disney use it for moving toys, Panasonic, Heineken, Diageo, and it was Diageo who worked with the tool to basically switch their beer cans that were now on ring pulls and then made them into cardboard, but then had that logistics benefit as well to the considerations in transition. So there's a more optimal pallet layout for that exact design. We've applied the same to containers. So just show you very quick. And when you're thinking about how do you optimally fill a container, now shipping is a vast industry. So how do you optimally pack containers? So you've got to think about which goods have got to come out first when they arrive at port, which goods are going to, the balance of goods in terms of the weight distribution, because that causes huge issues if the weight is into one corner or one side of a container as they're lifted. And there's a vast amount of considerations. And what you end up with is barely full containers because it doesn't solve that problem. So our algorithms basically enable that container fill to take place. That's just a little example. And that tool again is used by quite a few companies. What we want to do with that product is, and everybody's got £500,000 lying around, we want to turn this into a full-blown SaaS solution which will integrate right through from order management right through to the end delivery. So another big area is vehicle routing, and in terms of the is an area that we've been involved in for a long time. So that's not just vehicle routing. So we do the whole solution around how you, let's say you've got 100 vehicles, needs to do 10,000 deliveries. How do you optimally schedule all those deliveries and provide all those deliveries? We've been doing that for a long time and working with companies to look at their individual problems. But then what we've also done now is to start to do a lot more work in inventory routing and forecasting and trying to tie those two models together. And this has had a big switch in terms of one particular example we're working on is moving liquid oxygen supplies into hospitals. And instead of that being an ordered service, it is just a delivered service based on using sensors to understand depletion of oxygen supplies at hospitals, and then when you need to get those oxygen supplies in. I will give you hopefully another example. So we also do things like logistics network design, and this is just an example of two big companies merged together called VPS and Nevender, and their state of operations were that when they merged, there was about 36 different depots around the country. So what we did was we then said they came to us and said, hang on, we need to work out how we can realize some savings through this operation, but without infecting customer service. So what we did was we worked on a kind of greenfield scenario of where all their depots were in the UK, looked at their entire order history, taking all that volumes of data, and then building an algorithmic solution that said, this is your optimal provision of your services to your customers. And in 98% of that, we could actually get to the customer to do that same job historically for both companies as quick or quicker than previously by reorganizing their depots. So that basically meant that there was we reduced the number of depots to roughly 24, and that produced a 19.6% saving, which was equivalent of about £1.5 million. And if I give you another one, which is we're also working electric vehicles. So this is a smart charging solution. And basically what it is 100 vehicles come along at night, electric vehicles, and they all plug in at the same time. That typically tends to occur at 5 o'clock when everybody's coming home to have their tea, turn on all the lights, the kids are turning on the computers, everything's going at the time, and that's peak electricity period. The last thing you want to do is go and plug in 100 electric vehicles at the same time. A, it's very, very expensive. B, it could blow your networks. C, it's just incredibly inefficient, and there is no need. So what we do is we work out, using data science again, develop some algorithms to work out how we can optimally charge those vehicles during the night. And we're building a big project at the moment with Innovate UK to do that. So I can show you anybody who wants to see a bit more in detail later on, but what that does is shift all that charging into the middle of the night. And when you want all those fancy AI stuff, that's what it looks like. So that's 100 vehicles that would have been plugged in on the left, and now they're optimally charging with a schedule during the night. And what we've worked out, that saves about 47% of their electricity costs. So that solution is now being commercialized and turned into something we should launch next April as a nice piece of software. Sorry, that was a real whistle-stop tour of a few things we're working on. But yeah, they're practical applications which are all being turned into software. And I'll try and stop sharing now.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, Mum. Cool, I'm having problems with my lovely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. I think a theme that I've picked up here is just how artificial intelligence, which is obviously at the cutting edge of technology, is really helping to improve and support the improvement and transformation of some very, very fundamental systems. I mean, who would think about pallets and containers? But the movement and use of those resources are something that absolutely our way of life depends upon. Being able to make use of those resources is obviously what we want to see more of. So yes, and the same with Nick's project around, computer networks. So much we depend on that day to day to be able to work, particularly at the moment. And AI is absolutely embedded in there. I just wanted to mention that EPSRC funds research in these applications and embedded opportunities for AI, but also the fundamental artificial intelligence technologies themselves. And so the next generation of AI capabilities are being researched now with EPSRC investment. So I mentioned earlier on that there was a question. So Magnus talked to us about some of the risks and challenges around data ownership in particular. Nick, there was a question about equipment and the removal of some global suppliers equipment from networks in the UK, and has your project been affected in any way by that?
That's a good question, and unfortunately, we haven't had any impact from that. The sort of data that we work with is traditionally agnostic, so actually we're able to capture things like temperature information, traffic information. We're able to obtain that from multiple different vendors and suppliers. So actually, the fact that there's been those changes in provision hasn't impacted the project at all. So that's but it's a good question. Yeah, thanks.
So yeah, so thank you for that. I just wanted to ask each of the speakers in terms of, we've heard about some of the applications. We've also talked about the opportunities for universities to collaborate with business. So if a business was thinking that this is something I really do need to get involved in and learn much more about, where is a good place for a business that hasn't actually tried to apply this? Where is a good place for them to start? Mike, is there anything you would advise
in terms of developing solutions around?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the fundamentals of this is that data science applies right across all sectors. I think really, I think it's a huge amount of opportunity. I think that where people need to start is how they think that where opportunities can apply. So that if you look at things like processes within an organization, or where they believe identifying things like inefficiencies, etc., that they know could be improved, and that's ultimately going to give them things like competitive advantage. And that's why you've got to look at much wider than simply in terms of the UK, is then actually start to understand, give a bit of an idea of what that is, and then take it to an organization like one of the universities here, data science institutes, and start to look at the practical resolution of those problems. It's there may be off-the-shelf applications which could solve some of these problems. So things like vehicle routing we were talking about before, there are software packages you can buy. But for much more complex problems, talking to universities engaged in that could realize something very much more significant. And I think that's that early stage investigation, the kind of TRL 1 to 3 kind of level, where these guys are brilliant at it. I think after that, then it's how do you then develop that as a solution that you can develop for your organization. And those latter stages is working with, maybe perhaps companies like ours, or with people like Innovate UK, UKRI, etc., different organisations within that, to say, hang on a minute, how do I actually get this implemented within my business? And then I think it's kind of beyond that. I think it's kind of a bit of restless innovation. You've really got to, if you start to understand and utilise data science within your business, it's like how far do you take it? Because there isn't a point in just stopping. So I think to keeping going, keeping improving, and that's some of the fundamentals of things like machine learning, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Nick, I just wanted to ask, obviously BT is a very substantial company which has invested in R&D over many decades, but even they recognise that they need to be collaborating with researchers like you. What have you found has worked in working with BT? What's really worked for you to sort of get that project going?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've had a strategic relationship with BT for a number of years. So I think what's been really great about the Prosperity Programme is it's a co-creation. This is very much building a research programme with an industry partner and with a university. And so actually what is different about that scheme from the off is that it's actually built with that principle in mind. So it's been great to be able to work with an organisation that has a shared ambition around a goal. As you said earlier, bringing in other partners around the UK with different skill sets, because we've reflected on many of the challenges around AI alone are not ones that are just technology focused. They have kind of significant human factors associated with them. So being able to work with an organisation, bring in different skills to meet a strategic objective around BT, I think has been really exciting. And of course, because it's so important to BT, it cross-cuts all aspects of their business. So this ambition around how do we be more intelligent, how do we become more autonomous in the operation is core to the future of their business. So it's been a really, really great endeavour. I mean, we're just kind of 2.5 years in, but it's been a really exciting project thus far. And I guess the next phase is really about how we see that impact then being reached out across the organisation. So I think these schemes have been really, really good, and it would be great to have more of those in the future for SMEs in particular to be part of, because I think there's a real recognition that whilst this is a strategic project with a large organisation such as BT, the SMEs have a key role to play in that. And so the more recent schemes are very much focused on SME engagement and bringing those in. And certainly within our Prosperity Partnership, as we kind of move forward, we're looking to kind of open that up to more organisations to join in as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for mentioning the Prosperity Partnership Scheme. It's a funding opportunity offered by EPSRC. As Nick was saying, it's very much business led as a scheme. Businesses get an opportunity to involved in the assessment of proposals, and it's very much where we want to invest. And as Nick said, it's something we certainly want to be able to do more investment in the future. So for people who are thinking, actually, is that something for me? Well, if you're involved with the university already or want to start that conversation now, get involved with at least perhaps talking about your business issues with university experts, and start to build that relationship. And those sort of relationships can then potentially lead to an application for a prosperity partnership. But it's certainly one that, as a scheme that we invest in, is something we have been very proud to be able to do and want to do more of. I think I have one more question around skills in the UK, around, let me just find it here. How competitive is the AI sector in the UK? I know that the research base in the UK generally is considered world leading, but how can we make sure that we do stay at the forefront in terms of the development and deployment of AI? Magnus, do you have any thoughts about this? Obviously, the ATI is about supporting the next generation of researchers. Are we doing enough to invest in the next generation?
Well, the UK is in a pretty healthy position in terms of the tech sector and AI. So we do have some, I don't want to use the world beating too often, because, but we do actually have lots of world-class research labs in machine learning and AI. And we also have other sectors which have strengths in AI. So there's quite a healthy ecosystem. I think it could be more regionally distributed, probably. So I think there could be more outside of the sort of Cambridge and London region in terms of AI activities. So I think it'd be great to have more and more development like that. One thing I'd say is that Europe, not just the UK, is perhaps lagging the US and China a bit in terms of investment in AI. And this is a bit of a risk. The UK within Europe is actually quite strong, and some part of kind of running institute called Ellis, which is seeking to kind of redress that, because actually a lot of the breakthroughs in machine learning did come from European researchers. And a lot of the top people, for instance, in deep learning were based in Europe. But often the big investment following that often came from the US. And now China is investing hugely. So I think that is a risk that the UK has to try and find their niche, and sort of, maybe you can't compete just with dollars with the US and China, but if you focus on the right areas, I think you can compete in sort of specific areas of strength.
Thank you very much for that, Matt. Any other observations from Mike or Nick on that particular question?
We had just a couple of things for me. I mean, sorry, I know Rick Holland from UKRI has actually put a link up about in the chat about Innovate UK. I think that from that side of things, picking up from Magnus's point, really, is that if businesses in the UK, we want to get a lead in data science. I think things like what Innovate UK are doing by actually looking at specific sector areas you know, say things like electric vehicles or other aspects, clean tech particularly, then we've got a real opportunity. And I think one of those is things like energy. I mean, things like what Octopus Energy are doing and various other companies in energy, where we're actually showing we can be world leaders in specific sectors. And what we need to do is just continue to exploit and mine those opportunities. From a skills perspective, I think we've initially, obviously, data scientists were, well, they do command quite high salaries and so on. But one of the benefits of COVID actually is that we were looking, obviously, trying to employ people in Lancaster, and in Lancaster, we've got a bit of competition for one big company up at Lancaster University, or Lancaster University itself, of course, but plus also people like Relative Insights. We're a good, you know, good data science centre in Lancaster. But our most recent data science hire is actually lives in Belgium. So, and that, with the way COVID is working, he's on the team calls with everybody in the morning, the same as everybody else is. It doesn't make a difference to how we operate. And you know, that will probably be more the case as we go along, where we'll find specific experts in different markets who can happily work for us from a remote location.
Okay, thank you. We've literally come to the last couple of minutes and there are still questions in the box. I did mention at the outset that I'm going to be doing a blog post following this event, and I've picked up some of the links and that made in the chat section. So I'll make sure that in the blog post, which I'll hopefully put on the Marketing Lancashire website so people can follow up. Any final comments from the panel before we close? I mean, we've certainly covered a lot of territory today. Anything that anybody wants to say before we finish? No? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. With that note, as I mentioned earlier on, there are a couple of sessions this afternoon, one about quantum technologies and one about cybersecurity. May I thank all of our speakers for taking the time to join us this morning, and we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Natalie, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie, and thanks to all the panel. And just a quick note to say we've got 2 more sessions still to come today, so I hope you can join us then. But in the meantime, we'll conclude it there. Thank you very much for your time.
This October, you're invited to explore how you can harness innovation, consider new viewpoints and fresh ideas, and explore how learning, technology and innovation can come together. This brand new festival will champion some of Lancashire's latest innovations across 25 events, hosted by more than 50 speakers, including some of the county's innovation experts from higher education, health, clean technologies and many more.